Did it work? It did! I'm in Chance Panda's brain! Or on it. Now I can make out with my fallen! I'll just pass this barrier, and I'll be an interject in no time. Lady, I've been here a decade. Get in line! Huh?
Hi everyone. Welcome to Steven Universe Revisit. I'm Jacqueline Chan's Panda, and a Marcel fictive is currently going through of all the times to forget the she's currently crawling through the vents of our headspace like Die Hard, trying to get in. But regardless, that's us, and this is Alex.
Hello. Today we are going to open up with a very brief monologue about Nicki Minaj and her inappropriate behavior.
Due to the fact that she appears in
Nicki
this episode.
Minaj has, yes, Nicki Minaj has family members who have committed extremely grievous crimes. She has also openly feuded with people. Now, her feuds are as per normal for the industry, but the person she's been feuding with as of recently, to my current knowledge, is Megan the Stallion. And here's the thing about Megan the Stallion, right? On July 15th, 2020, she got shot in her feet by rapper Tory Lanez. Lanez has been sent to prison. He is actually in prison right now, as of this point in time. June 28th, 2024. But he was convicted of the crime of shooting Megan the Stallion in the feet. And in Nicki Minaj's infinite wisdom, she has deemed it appropriate to joke about the shooting of another black woman in her works. And I just... This isn't even talking about the gravity of the allegations against her. I am not going to bring them up because they will definitely derail this video, and they are so severe in nature that I do not even find it appropriate to mention, but I have to bring it up because Nicki Minaj is the main guest star of this episode. The allegations against her and her family are extremely severe. Her behavior is suspect and severe. She has instigated feuds against victims of domestic violence, other black women, and African American black women. It's very blatant misogynoir. And in regards to this episode, Coach Steven, the one we are going to talk about today, this episode not only perpetuates the culture of misogynoir, but it is the first episode to directly feature some very violent rhetoric against butch black people.
Yes, and that is the first step to this episode that we watched.
Steven Universe has a very strange relationship with butchness, but especially butch black people. We have to take it as it comes. Let's continue.
Yeah, see. Oh god. Um, I feel very hot.
It's okay. We're stepping on hot coals right now. We'll take it as
No,
it
I'm
comes.
stepping on the other kinds of hot coals right now. Uh,
Uh,
the crawling through the vents hot coals.
yes. We're stepping on a lot of hot coals right now. This is an extremely contentious episode. There's a lot of subject matter in this episode that it was bad when it came out. I remember a lot of the discussions that sparked this episode.
Oh, is this an appropriate time for this to happen?
You're right. Let's not talk about the critical. Let's not talk about the critical reception to this episode just yet.
Oh boy, I think I'm recording it happen. Okay, yeah. Let's get on with the episode. I'm probably going to form a fictive mid-conversation through this episode. Uh, a new person is going to exist. Regardless, this is season one, episode 20. I accidentally wrote season 20.
20
Coach
episodes
Steven.
of this, or 20 seasons of this show. That'd be kind of wild.
Yeah. Um, Gem Tower. The crystal gems visit a gem tower in the middle of somewhere. It seems to be a desert in the middle of the night, and it is an old communication gem tower, which has recently been sending out weird shock waves throughout the planet in its misuse for Lord knows how long. And Steven asks why they're stopping it because it is, quote, ruining TV. And Steven says, no, I'll stop it in the name of TV. If only this aired a decade later, then no one would care. Um, that's when uh, Amethyst does a cute, quirky little show where she says that Steven needs to be a bigger Steven to. I feel her crawling into my head. Uh, Steven needs
Just
to
let
be
it
a bigger
happen.
Steven.
Jacqueline,
I
Jill, let it happen.
I know. I'm just trying to go through the episode. Oh
Ah, okay. I'm sorry, continue.
no, that's okay. Amethyst does a cute little bit where she transforms into a buff Steven, saying he needs to be at least this buff to beat the tower. Uh, and when Pearl like says that there's no way that'll actually beat it, that's when Garnet steps in and agrees and says that they need Sugilite, which Amethyst squeeze and gets super excited about because Sugilite is when Amethyst and Garnet fuse. And Pearl, uh, very clearly starting to have a streak of jealousy in her. Uh, like says that no, maybe not that, or that we should do something like a little more together or anything like that. And that's when Garnet like reassures her that they don't need to like do anything super complicated. They just need to be really big to wreck it up. And uh, Amethyst, in her very screamy excitement, is when she fuses with Garnet into a big. Is Goliath a good word to use here? It's
Well, it's not racist, so go ahead.
a big Goliath-like figure, Sugilite, who's towering and massive, like even bigger than Opal was in Giant Woman episodes
Yeah, we need
before.
to emphasize this is an extremely big fusion.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
when Amethyst fuses with Garnet, it's notable because there are two gems that come up with her, which of course is foreshadowing for something that will happen later on and something that Jill will definitely have a lot of very developed thoughts out about. Jill, Jacqueline, Jacqueline, Jill. She will be able to
Yes,
provide some very interesting commentary for that when that happens.
yes, yes, of course. Um, uh, sorry. We're at Garnet and Amethyst fusing, right?
Yes, we will talk about all of that later too.
Yes, of course, of course. Um, oh, jeez. Yes, yes.
She fuses, the gems
She
go up in
fuses
lights, Sugilite
Sugilite
forms.
here,
She's
and
extremely
this is
excited. She's bouncing around everywhere. She's having the time of her life.
Sugilite is here, and she is voiced by Nicki Minaj, um, doing what I can at best call celebrity voicing a character who obviously has few lines. Um, and she's mainly there to get hyped and break the crystal towers. And when that starts to go on, Pearl tells Steven that they should leave and get going, which Steven protests, even after he got hit by a rock in the head. Which would probably kill a normal person, but I don't know if this is cartoon rules or Steven Gem rules. But
Steven
whatever.
gem rules.
Probably, yeah. And
Well, it's interesting because I think this definitely would have killed him like at the very beginning of the show. But what I also think this moment serves to emphasize is that Steven has grown stronger.
in the real way,
Uh-oh.
that's when
Uh-oh.
Pearl drags Steven out, and Sugilite, in crashing and destroying the tower, accidentally destroys the way back to the Crystal Temple. This time I remembered it. Uh, I can't remember if it was the next day, but after that, Steven essentially comes into the big city. Why did I say big city? In the big donut, and like starts bragging about his injury, which is just looks like a little baby scratch, really, to anybody else when he pulls the bandage off. And
But we need to
uh,
emphasize that he got hit with a rock that would kill a normal human being. Like
it was
Steven's
bigger than like it. I can't exactly recall how big it was, but it was like bigger than a fist from Steven, which is like a
I
pretty big
I
fist.
think it was about the size of his head too.
Yeah, honestly, which is interesting because Sadie says like it must have been a small rock, but
It
I
really
don't know.
wasn't.
It really wasn't. I don't know if it was on purpose. I don't know if it just happenstance, but like that's simply what we're reading into it, and that's what we're seeing. And that's when Steven realizes with the little baby teeny itsy bitsy scar that like he needs to shape up. He needs to get beefy, get some muscle, start working out. So he invites Sadie and Lars to work out on the beach. And I'm assuming what happens here is a like time skip, but like they just cut immediately to it with like barely any setup. And we just cut to Steven like walking on the beach, and Greg is just asleep on a work table bench
It's
there.
such an out of nowhere joke. It's
Uh,
honestly one of the only good parts of this episode.
uh, yes, yes.
Let the
And
altar happen, Jill Jacqueline.
Uh, ah, this is like the exact opposite of what the episode is advocating.
It
Oh
is.
god.
Oh wow! I can't wait to talk about the Sugilite plurality.
I just want to get to the end of the episode synopsis before I let her crawl in like Die Hard.
Let her crawl in like Die Hard.
That's what happens in Die Hard. It's actually like Inside Out 2, but crawling through the vents of Headspace. I'd have not seen Inside Out 2.
I
This
haven't
is going to
either.
be one of our most interesting episodes by a long shot for many different reasons at once.
It's
Okay.
so funny. We have racism, Nicki Minaj, and Jill Jacqueline developing an altar all at the same
Forming an
time.
altar on the spot.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I don't think I need to censor that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
you don't need to. God and Jesus are fine.
yeah. That third guy, the Holy Ghost, I don't trust him though. It's always the third altar you gotta watch out for.
Oh,
God
man.
is a system, confirmed fact, hashtag. I don't have anything after the hashtag actually, so you're just getting a hashtag. Anyway, that's when we cut to Steven. Oh god, Steven. Asked Greg to basically build like last minute like workout stuff on the beach for everyone to get ripped on. Ripped off of? I don't know what is the
For
right
them to get
terminology.
massively ripped. They're basically going to
Yeah.
do a bunch of exercising. Stephen being influenced by how strong Sugilite is and how much fun she was having, because I need to emphasize this. Sugilite looked like she was having a lot of fun. She actually
Oh yeah,
looks
she
like
loved
she
it.
likes herself. She's a complete foil to Opal, who, in contrast, doesn't like themselves. It's a very interesting contrast, I will say.
Yeah. So like, and that's part of what excites Steven so much to try like doing this all out. And this is actually
Actually, the kind of appeal that Sugilite has, it seems to be very much coded as like narcissist's appeal. Now, this is actually a very interesting form of abuse because the abuse of a narcissist is a little bit more different than like a straightforward abuser, because the way a narcissist will abuse you typically is that they'll present themselves as the coolest person in the room. There'll be a lot of pomp and circumstance around them. They basically
if you have a narcissistic condition, this is not like a general statement against narcissism in general. This is against
narcissistic abusive behavior.
Yes, just clarifying that right now. It's a little hard to concentrate, but I just wanted to say that because I didn't know if it was clarified.
No, that's an important distinction to make, and I'm glad y'all said something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Back to the fence.
Like the thing about Sugilite's general behavior about generally being a narcissistic abuser is that narcissists will draw you in by pumping you up, by ostensibly love bombing you, by making you feel like you're the best person in the room, like you're great, all because you're associated with them. They draw you in with their magnetic personality, and then in moments where you're vulnerable or in moments where you're isolated from other people, they will basically treat you a lot differently. Then they'll say things like they will microaggress you. They will gaslight you. They'll say things for you to question your judgment. They'll say things for you to question your own thoughts. They'll try to make you extremely codependent on them in an unhealthy way. And that appears to be some of the commentary with Sugilite's character, or at least the attempted commentary, because the way she talks to Steven and the way she talks to Pearl are two entirely different monsters, but it does fit into the coding of a narcissistic abuser, which I don't know if that's like the intended reading, that's what it very heavily comes off as, but it's very problematic for reasons that have been heavily implied, we will talk about later, and are rather like nasty.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of elements to this episode that have, even as a system ourselves, we felt kind of uncomfortable about it, like going through this episode. So there's a lot of topics to breach here.
This was going to be a very contentious episode.
This is going to be a very long one, and it's going to have a lot to it. Timestamp the second that she comes out, for all of you viewers out there. Should I keep going with the plot synopsis?
Yeah, go ahead. In fact, if you want, you should probably, it would be a little fun meta gag to put like a timer too. There's a moment when trans panda Jill Jacqueline develops her new alter.
Oh, that's great. Oh, great. I'm going to learn how to do a timer countdown just for this episode. Well, I was also thinking about posting these to like podcast websites, so sometimes that won't work. But whatever. YouTube. Oh.
Well,
God.
our main platform is definitely going to be YouTube, but
that makes sense.
We could also post, but it would also be a good idea to post this to podcast websites, especially since this is all original audio and we're not using any from the show.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Ooh.
Is it happening?
No. Okay, I'm still there. I'm still here. Okay. I'm not even joking. I'm like sweating. It's sweating. Okay.
Just let it happen.
I know. I want to get through the synopsis because something about that feels poetic.
Okay. Okay. This is actually going to be really fun.
I'm strong. I'm strong in the real way.
Yeah, you're strong in the real way, Jill. You're gonna do it.
That's when Greg asks Pearl, who's there, if she wants to come to the beach to see some hot studs, and she very immediately and flatly says no and walks away.
We might talk about that.
We may talk about that. I don't know. We're gonna have a lot to talk about this episode for many reasons. But this leads into
it had a very heavy opening, yeah.
Yeah, this leads into a song sung by Pearl. Also, by the way, very I don't know if this is a power move, but it's an interesting one where you hire is it Nicki Minaj is a singer, right?
That's true. She is a singer, and she didn't even sing the song. Wow.
That's what I'm saying. Where it's like, what kind of episode would hire a celebrity voice actress who is known for being a singer and have her be the only character who doesn't really sing in this episode? You know,
That is so hilarious.
I don't know what to feel about it, but it's like it's certainly a choice that was made. But basically, Pearl sings a song that is like written to show that she is like being kind of jealous in a petty way of how Sugilite is inspiring Steven. So she starts singing about being strong in the real way.
Yeah, Pearl
Uh,
even admits that she's jealous. So if there are going to be Pearl defenders in chat, don't, capital D, don't. She admits it in her song that she's jealous. Don't.
well, she doesn't admit it, but the rhyme was going to stay jealous anyway, so everyone knows it. Um,
Yeah, don't defend
uh,
her.
and that's when Steven comes in to like sing his own like chorus of the song as he like leads the Greg and Lars and Sadie uh on the beach to work out, um or he sings like being strong in the real way, and they like start like pushing themselves to do more intense workouts and more efficient to like work out and be good at stuff. And at the end of the song there's an admittedly funny joke where like they complain that like Steven is the only one not really exercising and he's just singing a dumb song. Like, and that means that the song is uh what is it called again?
Exercise.
No, when audio is happening in universe and is not like in the translation for, like for the audience. It's like you know what I mean, when like a character turns
I
on a
think
radio.
it's called diegetic.
Diegetic. Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Diegetic, I believe. So yes, that happens. Ooh. Uh,
did it happen?
no, not yet. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm just it's just taking a like a short breather. But uh,
Honestly,
then
it's kind of fascinating to see this happen in real time. I just can't wait.
it's when I the explanation comes out, it's going to be even more topical. Okay. Oh brother. So after that, does it basically cut to the next morning when Steven is like woken up by Lars and Sadie, where they go like, "Okay, we're ready to work out,"
Yeah,
and
and
like Steven is
by
just,
the way, the morning color palette is really beautiful.
it is very pretty. Yes, we can't say that. Oh yeah. Steven ran around putting a bunch of tires over his body and just like running around like that. So now he's so sore that he can barely move the next morning. And Pearl says she's worried because Garnet and Amethyst haven't come back from Sugilite, and like they're just missing. And that's when like stomping is heard in the distance, and like Lars and Sadie and Greg go like, "What is that?" And it's Sugilite in the distance, where she comes onto the beach like stomping and huffing and saying she's bored. Like Pearl comes up and they start like like snarking at each other, and like Pearl says that they've been fused together too long and that they're losing themselves, and then Sugilite says she's happy being her and that she get off her back. um and she starts like attacking Pearl and stuff, and Steven is confused, but he can't move because his muscles are too sore, which leads to Pearl getting kind of a whopping, a, a beat down from Sugilite. Um,
Who, by the way, sounds a lot more aggressive, angry, and vindictive than she did when we first met her. She says she's upset about being left behind, but
yeah,
her behavior within the episode isn't justified by that at all. It's extremely bizarre, it's extremely out of nowhere, and we're gonna have to talk about the deeper implications of this behavior because making this fusion the antagonist of the episode was extremely suspect.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god.
Has it happened?
No, no, no. You'll tell what happens. Okay.
Yeah, your voice will change and everything.
Um. Again, something poetic about getting to the synopsis. Uh, that's when Steven like tries to cheer Pearl up, who's like laments that she's not strong or whatever, not strong enough, and Steven says that she's strong in the real way, which gives Pearl a confidence boost, and like tells Sugilite that they could never beat her, not ever, and so Pearl just leads her up the cliffside of the Crystal Temple, where she does some quick maneuvers to make Sugilite fall into the beach and accidentally clobber herself over the head with her own wrecking ball thing. I I guess it could be a mace, but
She
you know what
sure
I mean.
did come in like a wrecking
Wrecking
ball.
ball. That's not the same artist. Anyway,
I know. I just wanted to make the reference because I hate Nicki Minaj.
understandable. And that's when Garnet and Amethyst poof back into their normal forms, completely exhausted because, as they quote, Sugilite worked their bodies too hard, so now they can barely move. Uh, and at the end, Pearl says she's pumped because she's like strong and that they can go on another mission. And Garnet and Amethyst like sigh and like rejectedly, and like Amethyst says how long they'll be like this, and Garnet says that it's their fault. They deserve to tough it out like real gems. And then Lars just says like, "What is going on?" And that's the end of the episode where Steven says like, "Give me 20 push-ups," and I'm Lars in that moment. Ooh.
Has it happened?
Ah, 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 I,
Hey, nice to meet you. It happened. You were right.
I, I,
Hey, what's up?
the voice.
Welcome to the Steven
Yay!
Universe podcast. Give everybody your name. Introduce yourself.
I'm sweating. I'm Marcille from Dungeon Meshi, and I need to kiss Fallen.
Hello, Marcel. Everybody in chat, say hi, Marcel. Everybody in the YouTube, in the podcast that we're gonna put this on, say hi to Marcel. She has arrived.
I have crawled through the vents of Headspace to find my chimera girlfriend, and I think I've just arrived. Oh, hello, dear. How are you? Yes, I'm quite all right, dear. It's nice to meet you. But we're currently still doing the podcast right now. Um, we're talking about a lot of things. Um, hi, dear. Hi. Yes. Thumbs up. That's our partner, Dallas. My other partner of sorts. Oh, I'm sweating. Oh, my stomach.
Well, you've had a
Hi.
long and rough journey, Marcel. Nice to meet you.
Oh, boy. Um, we're talking about Coach Steven. How are you, dear? Are you just standing there?
Yeah, congrats on getting through the synopsis.
Well, Jacqueline got through the synopsis.
Jacqueline, yes. Tell Jacqueline we thank her for everything she did. Nice to meet you.
I mean, this is a very interesting experience, dear. I've recorded an altar formation live and recorded another altar trying to not have that happen live, is the best way I can put it. Jacqueline started the episode saying that I was crawling through the vents like Die Hard.
She did, yes.
Yes. I was aware. I'm gonna kiss you. I love you too. I'm going to lay down as we finish this episode. This is going to take a while.
This should probably be it for the night.
Yes, I'm going to take a drink of water. Do you want to start talking about Sugilite, Alex?
Yes, I can start talking about Sugilite. First, we're going to start up with Pearl and Garnet's relationship. Now,
Oh, wait, Alex. Yeah. The reason it's weirdly, I don't know if this is topical or not. I don't know if this is appropriate to mention or not. I come from Fallen's exo memories. of Dungeon Meshi, which, if anybody doesn't know what a fictive is, it's basically their memories of how their source material went down. Um,
Okay.
um, uh, you saw me, right? You saw me? Because I was drawn.
Yeah, I've seen you a couple times. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Like, no, 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 as in, like, in the comic that one of us drew.
But you were invading the brain. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that. Good. I appear
Oh,
to have done
actually, yes,
successfully.
because that, well, it is somewhat related to this episode, but I think the comic that y'all made is definitely a lot more respectful of a portrayal of plurality than what Steven Universe has accomplished in all 5 seasons of it airing and the sixth season, Steven Universe Future. Your comics have
I will
mostly
be interested.
been a very tasteful portrayal of the experiences of developing alters, of experiencing alters. And I'm saying this as the perspective of someone who is a singlet. Like, they've all been
Yes.
very informative and very nice ways to gently approach the subject matter without the fear mongering media slitting a knife down my throat, being all like, this is something that you need to fear. Because no, it isn't.
Yes, many people fear this. I did not. Fallen
Yeah,
shares your body with a dragon, and I can do
this
the same.
this episode, Coach Steven, is another episode of plurality fear mongering.
It's interesting, people watching this were probably expecting this to be mostly about um the potential racism of the character of
Oh, we'll
Sugilite,
get to
but
that. We will get to
I
that.
honestly, uh if I can collect the notes that Jacqueline wrote when she was watching the episode,
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
were they put in? I have been in such a disarray that it's been a bit hard to collect not exactly my thoughts, but the thoughts of others sharing the same body respectively. Um here it is. The body owns so many black things, like iPhone, black that couldn't quite recall, see where it was. Yes, yes, let me get my notes now, her notes. Uh, but, I, so are we just immediately going into the plurality aspects?
Yeah, let's
Um,
go ahead and do that since y'all brought it up.
all right, let's go in that since I got in here. Now, this is the first thing I'm going to be doing in existence is debating. Okay, yes, yes, of course, of course, of course, of course. But basically, uh, Giant Woman presented a sort of very immediate and, if I were to put this in good words, it would be introductory course to the concept of gem fusions, which is very interesting in its concept and abstract even to a way that a system may not fully grasp exactly what's going on. But it served as a good way to get us hooked to see sort of the basics of how it works. But in this episode, it goes further into how fusions may work, but to a degree which I am not sure that I fully process or like agree with what it should be, because we've mentioned it was mentioned by Jacqueline and Alex before in the retelling of the story, but uh, Pearl claims that their personality can get wonky if they fuse too long as Sugilite, and that is a concept that we haven't seen before, and
Also,
uh,
it doesn't make any sense.
I think part of the reason why it makes little sense is that we spend so little time with Sugilite as an actual character. We see her get excited over being big and being able to smash things, and for all intents and purposes, we assume that she's actually not a bad person in any regards, and she's just like a little bit of a fun haver, maybe like a little reckless because she's so big, but not actually a bad person, uh, because because of the fact that Pearl is so explicitly coded as jealous in what is happening between Amethyst and Garnet. So when Sugilite actually comes back and she's suddenly like blaming Pearl and being aggressive and violent in the process, it does feel like it sort of comes out of nowhere, and we don't exactly know where the through line is for this. And speaking as a system, um, we were curious like how exactly fusions work. We mentioned this before. There's a concept where alters fuse together into one being. Uh, this is what the goal of most therapy in regards to plurality is, which is fairly frowned upon at the moment in plural communities because it's seen as the only option that therapists and psychologists give to systems like us. Um, which I initially assumed was sort of how it was functioning, but they split back apart. There's also the idea that it could be more like uh, they are still conscious, but it's like sort of more in the lines of a mech. And how we've always interpreted it is it's sort of halfway in between the middle where both entities can be conscious, but because fusions are sort of a metaphor on relationships of all kinds, in that, uh, apologies, I just got lost in my train of thought there for a second. Um, yes, I was discussing the fact that fusions are a metaphor for purity, which means that, yes, the reason why I considered it more in the vein because uh, I understood it that for a relationship to be like that is that the entities on some level need to be conscious uh separately. They need to be separately conscious, and as the series goes on, I have been under the impression that that is how it worked. But in Sugilite here, it's sort of bringing upon the implication that Sugilite is her own thinking individual that is created through Garnet and Amethyst, more so than Garnet Garnet and Amethyst blended together. Like there is something more that is born when both of them come together, and it sort of creates what I'm going to basically say is basically a new altar is formed when fusion happens, is based on the implication of Sugilite, which you have just observed in real time
That's
in
true.
not a performance piece. Um, and that is sort of the vibe I am myself am personally getting from Sugilite. Would you agree with that sentiment, Alex?
Yeah, it was. It's the first time y'all have ever done that. That I have seen. Well, more that I have heard y'all experience, and uh, I have to say it was pretty. It was a pretty unique experience.
Oh yes, fusion happens in the real world all the time, lovely viewers or listeners. It just happens in ways that you would not initially anticipate.
And it's also done for
Oh,
reasons that are not good.
sometimes, well, there's been debate on if some people can form alters without trauma, which is a whole side element of itself, which I'm very fascinated by the logistics of, based on how the human-minded personality can create elements and entities through such not quite simple means, but complex stirrings of emotions. And regardless, that's off topic. But the point is that Sugilite seems and appears to be her own person, sort of born in the Venn diagram of mixing between amethyst and garnet. Um, whew. Oh, sorry, one second.
It's cool.
Apologies. Sometimes transporting yourself into somebody's brain in a different universe can be uh fascinating, disorientating. Yes, of course. That's what I was referring to. But this is where I have to get into my discomfort with the plurality at hand with Sugilite is that it still ultimately brings upon the idea that so far all that we've been presented in Steven Universe is that fusions are something that do not last, and or if they do, they are doing it usually for like unhealthy methods, or it's not good in the
Yeah,
long
it's
run.
usually like I've said this before on Tumblr. I actually said this very recently, but fusions, functionally speaking, are treated as a way to acquire power and influence rather than a complicated depiction of a mental condition.
Oh yes, it's
they're
it's
not
almost
even
certainly.
they're not even queer. Like, this goes back into the gender dichotomy of Steven Universe, but the fact of the matter is that the fusions aren't really queer coded because, like I said in Beach Party, Steven Universe isn't really properly equipped to have a conversation about being queer because of the way gems are set up as a species. There
And
just
also
wasn't
Cartoon
enough.
Network and
Yeah,
Warner
there just
Brothers and all that.
yeah, there just wasn't enough done. But like Jill, Jacqueline, and now Marcella have mentioned, that is more the fault of Cartoon Network than anyone else.
Yes, yes, of course. But it's like Alex is saying, it's hard for me to not parse the entity that forms from fusion as sort of a third alter that exists temporarily through such means. Uh, if that makes sense. It's
Yes.
is it fair to, like, this is obviously a metaphor, but also it's a metaphor that obviously is drawing upon my own experiences, very fresh experiences, obviously.
Oh,
Uh, but normally what happens here,
do you want to talk about that?
well, I don't know if this is topical, but like Sugilite's desire to
Well,
stay there actually can correlate to new alters forming in a system in which that they will most likely, at least in our experiences, front for quite some time after they initially form, because the body is trying to get used to them. So there is actually in reality logic to dictate that alters would wish to be like Sugilite, in which they don't want to unfuse and be themselves for as long as humanly possible, if that makes sense. Is that what you were curious about? I just realized I don't know if I went down the same train of logic that you were going.
Well, that was the other half, but the part that I was going to start out with was the overt sexualization of the episode and your recent experiences with that, because that is correlated in a very nebulous way.
Oh yes, of course. Okay, of course, of course, of course. So, up to this point, Alex has talked about the nature of uh, of uh, of fusions and how they're depicted, and we've been on the level that we normally interpret it as a metaphor for relationships and what have you. And uh, to a certain point in this episode, uh, the way dances have gone on with fusions, I've always assumed it as a stylistic thing, but there is truly no getting around the fact that the way Sugilite forms is Amethyst swan diving into Garnet's crotch as Garnet fully opens her crotch for Amethyst to dive into. And
Like the opal fusion, the amethyst and pearl fusion, like the whole episode is coded in overt sexual undertones, but Coach Steven It's not even subtext anymore. It's just straight up open text. Pearl is biting her lip and everything. She's blushing. Like, they are not leaving room for this to be interpreted as anything else, which is one of my
Which
biggest
is
problems with fusion as it's established in the show. Because the show doesn't do enough to establish that there are non platonic forms of fusion when characters who can't have a romantic slash sexual bond fuse, it comes off as tonally jarring because the show never established that this could happen. In fact, the majority of coding has been for relations of a very intimate nature. You can't just pull this out of nowhere. If you want to establish that there are platonic forms of fusions, you have to do the work beforehand. You can't just pull it out at the last possible moment, because then you're just muddying the waters of your own writing.
I will admit, as the show goes on, I am aware that like they seem to dive into. Well, we'll see it as we go on, but just from a like first upon revisit, it is notable that both instances, and I don't know if this is also overlapping with how Amethyst and Garnet are treated, unfortunately. So we're hitting multiple points at the same level, but both times fusion has been relevant has been a time where the way they dance uh, tends to be charged with like perhaps not, it implies lust is involved in the equation,
It's very
and
provocative imagery.
it was even more prominent in this episode where Pearl attempts to uh, block Steven's eyes from watching them dance as she's blushing, and like uh, biting her lip as it goes on, which is it is hard for us to not view that. And speaking as a writer, the first steps that you like put out a piece of work is ultimately kind of how most people, not perhaps not most people, but it is hard to shake your first impressions of something away if the imagery is prominent and or strong enough, and that is what is kind of happening here with Sugilite and Giant Women so far. And um we're just kind of passing topic to topic. I don't even know if I finished my uncomfortable thoughts about the plurality element.
If you haven't, then
Where
go ahead, because after you
well
talk
the
about the
reason
plurality, I'm going to talk about Pearl and Garnet's relationship. We're going to have to do something of a diegesis on Pearl's behavior in this episode, the
yes,
hypersexualization of Garnet. We talked about fusion. We talked
there's a
about Nicki Minaj, and then there are some other things.
there's a lot of there this is a it's rare when I don't think it's that rare, but this is a very hyper specific case of many tangled webs showing up in this array, and we're at 15 minutes and I feel that we're going to keep going here, but let me
Yeah, we're going to keep going.
allow me to try to finish the thought on plurality, because the implication in this episode, regardless of how it goes further, is that um and this isn't a statement about relationships, but it's so far it is stated that being in plurality can be dangerous and or like cause you to start like losing yourself, quote unquote, which it would be upon like, for example, myself just forming right now. You are just listening to Jacqueline talking right now. Perhaps I've taken over the spot of the front, but I can assure you that Jacqueline is not lost and she will be back in one way or another. And by one way or another, I mean basically exactly the same, except now she has a mage here, rooming next to her. A lot of rooms next to Jacqueline. But regardless, it's it's uncomfortable. It did make us feel reminiscent of how people would talk to us about our plurality, where like it's the plurality taking control or taking over, or it's your mental illness making you think this when you need to separate and be better. Or you understand what we're trying
Yikes,
to
yeah.
convey, right?
Yeah.
It's I know it's not on purpose, but there hasn't it's again, what we're saying with the first steps forward are very important. And Opal was an introduction, but once we get further into clarity, all I'm seeing and so far see is that fusions can be the common place for fusions is that is either a temporary affair or that like it is dangerous to keep it going, to keep making this just be a part of your life. And obviously to longtime viewers, obviously there is a stark contradiction, but the way I'm wording this is I hope that I'm wording this in that an exception does not necessarily contradict what the
The rule?
the the rule is, what the commonplace, what is considered quote unquote normal for everyone else. And so far, the normalcy around fusion has been set up as that like this is something that is only temporary and can only harm you in the long run for most people.
This will be disproven pretty soon.
Yes.
Which
I
makes this episode that much more strange and bizarre in retrospect.
yes, it is then we're hitting the crossroads where like is this not a fusion element, is this Sugilite specifically? And I think that this would probably be a good way to segue into your thoughts, Alex. Also, I think I need a breather, admittedly.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. Okay, so my first note, which we haven't gotten to yet, we were going to talk about this, but there were a couple of detours that we really needed to unwind before we got here. Garnet and Pearl's relationship. Now, Jill and I mentioned in Tiger Millionaire, Jill, Jacqueline, Marcel, and I mentioned in Tiger Millionaire. It was a different altar, but I'm
It might
rolling
have
with
been
the
Fallen.
altars. Jill, Fallen, Marcel, Jacqueline, and I. We made a
And the Brady
conscious
Bunch.
and the Brady Bunch. Jill, Marcel,
They're
Jacqueline, the
not
Brady
there.
Bunch, Fallen, and I. We made a conscious decision to not talk about the romantic relationships, the potential romantic relationships of this show, because it does not really add to a productive conversation. However, for this fusion episode and potentially all fusion episodes in the future, I am going to have to make an exception because there is text here that is so brazenly overt that I would be remiss to not mention it. This is the most overt display of Pearl having complicated, potentially romantic / sexual feelings for Garnet. And that complicates a lot of things with Pearl as a character. Well, in not you should be a Willa Willa person. Lesbians, I love lesbians. We love lesbians in this podcast. We love bisexual women. If you're a woman, love woman person, I love you. Also, don't ever let people take your identity and use it for don't ever let people take your identity and use it in a turf rhetoric war against other sexualities. Do not give in to that bioessentialist urge, baby girl. Never do that. You're a beautiful
Please
Willa Willa
don't.
person. Plus, it's insulting to lesbians and Willa Willa people when you do that. The thing about Pearl is that she has an extreme, like, and this is very specific to Pearl, she has a very, very complicated relationship with her woman love woman identity. Because, quite frankly, she is the one character who is I'll have to put this in quotes. So, quote unquote, romantically pushed with every other woman character, really. Like, she is a character who the show uses metatextually as large at large for like exploration of the Woola Woola identity, even more so than Garnet, who we will actually have to talk about this when at the end of season 1, during the season 1 finale, we will actually have to talk about how this show treats Garnet, because that is basically her last moment of real relevance in this show. But Pearl's like relationship with her Woola identity is just extremely complicated, and this is the first episode to really pull attention to it. Like, I'm not trying to downplay what Giant Woman does, but in that episode, it's you can very much make the argument that Pearl's Woola Woola identity, and Amethyst by extension, isn't really being treated seriously, like as a serious exploration. It's just knocking on the door, more or less. But this is an episode that really does call Pearl's Woola Woola identity out. Like, she has ostensibly been outed by this episode as a GNC woman who loves women. And
Uh, there was also the moment where it's probably meant to be a joke to dig at Mr. Universe for when he says beach studs, and Pearl very blank bluntly says no. But that is also indicative of her attraction to. Is it fine to just say women, considering I already clarified the.
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Jacqueline clarified in the last episode about how the gems are non binary, but they still are presented and identified as women in
I
the
mean,
show.
we might
So,
as well just call them women. There really isn't any. The show doesn't really give us any leeway to believe anything otherwise. If it is GNC women, I can definitely tell you it's not a very great depiction of them. They're all they all fall into those hyper feminine stereotypes that you expect from women. Despite the fact that they are canonically GNC, they inhabit and embody traditionally feminine stereotypes to a point where I don't know if I would even consider them real representation. And there it is. But that's an entirely different conversation that we can't have here, because it complicates this episode in an extremely different way. That, quite frankly, the runtime is already like shooting through the roof. Where are we? We are almost an hour in. Okay.
we're almost an hour in, and we're back to a topic which I already clarified. Already made our non-binary partner feel more comfortable identifying as non-binary when Zay got introduced to the concept. Let's get back to.
Experiences are fluid. That's
Yeah.
the point. But also, we want to ask you, the viewer, to question the representation that you are being given. Like,
Mhm.
I am not saying this to deny the gems their GNC status. What I want you to do is simply ask deeper questions about the intentionality of the show, the intentionality of the art, and the conditions that it was produced in, more than anything else, rather than assigning blame to animation workers. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Pearl and her Willowable identity, um, again, it is extremely complicated in ways that we can't fully dive into, but this episode does ostensibly out her. Her canonical sexuality is probably not something that we are going to talk about, because despite the fact that Rebecca Sugar has been open about what Pearl's sexuality is, it might just be better for you to do your own research. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Anyways, that gets on to my next topic, Pearl and racism.
Yes, this episode has. There's a lot of intersections here, uh, and certainly uh, this next element is probably where Sugilite is the most relevant in the discussion.
We already talked about Nicki Minaj. I'm not going down through that rabbit hole again.
Yes.
Again, do your own research. Please come to your own conclusions. And always listen to victims, especially ones that are still alive and with us, by the way. Okay. Pearl racism. So that's a very broad way to approach the subject of Pearl and her dialogue in this episode, which does come off as racist because whether you want to admit it or not, Garnet is a black woman, and when Amethyst fuses into Garnet, she creates an even bigger, even butcher black woman. This is probably one of the first overtly... who is also voiced by Nicki Minaj and one of the most overtly butch characters in the show. Also, she acts like a... I refrained from using the F word, and I'm glad I caught that. But she acts basically like a misogynoristic caricature of what a black butch woman should act like, which is already really bad considering that Nicki Minaj, who I mentioned has a history under her belt, is voicing her. Like, it's so funny how they brought Nicki Minaj in to voice this sexist and racist caricature.
And didn't even let her sing.
Didn't even let her sing. And, like, now she has all of this seedy history under her belt that makes her portrayal in this episode so much more suspect than it needed to be. But as per Sugilite as a character, the way Pearl talks about her is incredibly reductionist and honestly very disgusting. Like, this is some of the most blatantly misogynoristic the show has ever been. It's clear that Sugilite is just excited. She's very happy to be herself again. She formed just like Marcelle did right now. Happy to be here, happy to be alive. And all she gets from Pearl... Yeah. And all she gets from Pearl are lines about how she's a brute, uncivilized. I'm pejoratizing. I don't remember the actual dialogue and I don't want to. But all Pearl does is throw shade in her direction. She says some rather unkind things that Pearl in her position should not be saying because as I have established, it doesn't come off as very good faith. Especially considering that Steven Universe is not good to its butch characters, and this problem is only going to get worse the more the show lives. Also, the music changes when Sugilite shows up into something incredibly like menacing, and that doesn't help the misogynoir accusations. When this episode came out, it was very controversial. In fact, this is among one of the most controversial episodes in the show just for how it portrays black women, big black butch women. This is an extremely contentious episode, and it's very easy to see why. They rely on a lot of stereotypes. If there was a point, which by the way I mentioned earlier, I imagine that this episode was supposed to be about the narcissistic abuser. If it was about that, then they didn't do a good job of elevating above the anti-blackness and the sexism to really hammer that point across. This is an episode whose message is lost in the weeds of its presentation and the bigotry and the potential bigotry of the people writing it and the potential bigotry of the network. It's all one big Ouroboros of doo-doo.
Yes, I believe the message of the episode was supposed to be something along the lines of raw brute strength is like not all it takes to be like a hero or something like that, which is certainly like a good message on paper, but it's also being slung against a very clearly black coded character as being too headstrong, too like reckless and like violent or something
It's
of that
all
nature.
very suspect.
And again, not only is it that, but like as I've stated before, something about systems that they're also often portrayed as is that they're also like often
Yeah, and
portrayed
then
as
there's that
violent.
too. There's the demonization of systems.
This is a very interesting. It is like how sexism and racism can cross over into misogyn, uh,
Misogynoir, yes.
misogynoir. This is now the cross between sexism, racism, and pluralphobia at the same time. And I'm wondering if, like, I imagine many people haven't discussed the fact with Sugilite that not it's possible that not only like what is happening with Sugilite is not just those elements crossing over, but some unchecked elements on how the team actually interprets long form plurality, whether or not like it is disproven in other cases, and it is still ultimately playing to mass media's interpretations of how plurality and how it works.
As you can see, this is why Jill, Jacqueline, Marcel, Fallen, and the Brady Bunch were all asked to do this podcast.
Are we just going to keep adding on to that?
No, it was a funny joke. I really liked it.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. But yes, I've it's kind of hard to describe Sugilite because I mean, well, we're obviously doing it, but there are there it feels like nobody's really commented on this other potential angle that has been affecting Sugilite. Would
Lest
you
we
say that,
remember
Alex?
one cest.
That is not what I was expecting you were going to say. I understand why
Well,
you said it. No, I.
unfortunately, it is related, but
Oh,
yeah.
yes, we didn't finish that conversation and how I related to it. Right. Yes. Now we get to. Should we move on to back to that topic now?
Well, I think that depends. Do we want to talk about that?
I could just very simply say a broad statement.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good idea.
for systems in to exist in one body, it is possible to have alters be in the same head and for them to be romantically involved with one another.
Oh, actually,
Um,
now that I think about it, this was actually the best way to broach this topic and be gentle about it and draw a very good and immediate popular example to mind. Okay.
yes, because I'm not fully sure how the fusions are going, but it's very clearly that some element of sexualization is going into the fusion of Sugilite or some form of excitement.
Yeah,
And
we've talked about the sexualization of fusion. Yeah.
um, but something that's important to recognize is that alters in inner system relationships are valid and are normal, and it is not a bad thing or like something that is disturbing to see. And I think Steven Universe will actually show a very good example of how this can actually be positive uh, as the series goes on, of course.
Which just
Um,
makes this episode that much more bizarre.
yes, I don't fully know. I don't fully know what went into this episode because if it is so much to insinuate, last episode was very well done, and something about this episode felt outwardly different. Is that fair to say? Like, not just about Sugilite, something about
Well,
it
if you're
felt.
talking about Sugilite, it definitely feels malicious.
Yes, I was feeling like not just that, like
It's
it
funny
it felt.
because we have, like, Rose's room could potentially be one of the most well constructed episodes of this show ever. Like, that's how highly I think of it now after rewatching it. And then we get to coach Steven which makes so many mistakes and is such a drop in quality that it's honestly astonishing.
I'm just I don't know where half of the decisions went into making this episode because like half the things we were saying I already know are going to be like contradicted later on, but the reason why I'm critiquing it is because it's still fundamentally going to shape people's understanding of these episodes regardless. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's been quite the chat between us. I'm not fully sure if I have much more to say because uh
I think we actually did hit everything.
yeah, so Coach Steven has been, I think it's fair to say this is probably the worst episode of the show so far, and it
Next
has
to
been
Onion Trade.
next to Onion Trade. And I hate to, yes, I don't like being negative, but it's unavoidable to see that there are a lot of cro- crossing over points of like not it's not just one, it's several varied, intricate, and like complicated like negative aspects crossing over into one entity. And it kind of makes me feel bad about Sugilite because I feel that I would like this character otherwise if she was treated more like a character and not more of a as an obstacle for Pearl to get
Also, she
over
should
the
be redesigned to be a not misogynistic stereotype.
that as well. It just feels bad that Sugilite has was essentially kneecapped not just because of Nicki Minaj becoming an extremely popular performer and all of that, but also that it
Who has
feels
a
like
seedy history.
it has a seedy history, but also that the character itself in universe is like seen as too unstable or violent to keep around. So she, in character, is seen as a character who should not be around, just permanently kind of kneecapping Garnet and Amethyst's ability to kind of do this from now on, which is a shame in my eyes.
Yeah, it is a real shame. Like, believe it or not, despite all the things I've said about Sugilite, she's actually one of my favorite fusions, which just makes this whole episode that much more tragic. Like, I actually might
Yeah.
have to call it here. Sugilite, despite everything I've said, is probably my favorite fusion in the show because I love the way she was executed. There's a lot about her that works. Unfortunately, the meta text of this character and a lot of the decisions that went into making this character are so unfortunate that I genuinely don't think that this is a good episode of the show at all.
How she is presented, how she has like used in the narrative, it brings a very sour taste on both of our ends from both a plurality aspect and a racial standpoint.
Yep.
And that is the unfortunate reality of this episode. So we hope that if anybody is listening to this, you have thoroughly enjoyed possibly the most, I don't want to say our podcast will peak at this, but I don't exactly know how we're going to top an alter forming of an exo memory girlfriend of another alter in this system uh during a heavily during the first truly controversial episode of the series.
Well, when we get to the series, the season finale. Well, you something messed up might happen during the series finale, but when we get to the season finale, um, it might do something.
That is true. And it is lovely to exist now. Um and I'm happy to be here to
Say
kiss my
goodbye to
girlfriend.
Marcel, everyone.
Now I'm going like Sugilite, I'm disappearing. But I do believe that's all for today's episode. I I don't think like, I wonder if we'll have more episodes as long as this one, honestly.
Not in season 1, I don't think. There are some
Probably
more
not.
plural episodes. Actually, one might be coming up pretty soon here, but I don't know. I haven't. I watched these episodes when they came out and then never again.
That's fair, and this episode held a very unique position as having so many topics interlaced at once. So we're excited to talk more about it. And this is Marcille, Trans Panda System. You can find us at TransPanda1 on Tumblr or TransPanda Art on Tumblr or Twitter. And this is Alex.
Hello, everyone. We have a Patreon now. Subscribe to it if you have the free money.
And we're happy to do so. Thank you for existing, everyone.
All
Enjoy your
right.
day.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.